Welcome back. I'm Mike Renner. He's Sam Monson. Today we're going to be breaking down run concepts in today's NFL. And while it may look complicated just on first glance watching it to the untrained eye, there really are only a handful of run concepts that NFL teams employ on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, everybody knows man versus zone blocking schemes, but even when you go beyond that to the actual core run concepts, there's only a few of them.
Yeah, there really are only a few, and we're going to go through today and break down the most popular ones, the ones that we here at PFF track and put into these specific buckets. And we're going to start off here with outside zone. One of the most common run concepts in the NFL today, basically a wide play where offensive linemen are responsible for whichever defensive lineman or linebacker comes into their sort of area. And also known as a stretch play, but the big part about it is it's a wide run play. You're trying to get sideline to sideline.
Yeah, multiple points of attack, multiple options for the running back to take. He's the guy that kind of dictates where that run is going to go. He has to read his keys and hit the right hole. But looking at some numbers, there's some pretty fun things. Last season, the New Orleans Saints averaged 5.8 yards per carry on outside zone runs. But 4 of those yards on average came after contact. So those running backs, Alvin Kamara was making a huge amount of that yardage. The Chiefs and the Rams were at 5.3 yards, but only 3 yards of those came after contact. They led the league in yards before contact, before they got anywhere. The Cardinals averaged a miserable 1.6 yards per carry on outside zone runs, a full yard worse than anybody else in the league. And that's probably why they only ran it 45 times.
Yeah, outside zone famously was the Shanahan system. That's the Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan before him. That's their bread and butter. That was with the late 90s Denver Broncos teams were fantastic at it. One of the most successful modern run plays in the NFL today. And it's just a wider version of inside zone. The next play, as you see here, inside zone, very often going to hit between the tackles. It is a downhill smash mouth sort of run play where similar concept in terms of the offensive linemen are taking whoever is in their sort of zone, but at the same time, you're firing off the ball, far more of a downhill run.
Yeah, it's the brute force version of the zone play. So
yeah.
Instead of relying on offensive linemen being athletic and just outmaneuvering the defenders, it's relying on a bit more power. It's trying to get that downhill thing working. Again, the New Orleans Saints at the top of the tree when it comes to yards per carry on inside zone runs, 5.4 yards per carry, led the league. The Kansas City Chiefs propped up the table, 2.9 yards on average. The Philadelphia Eagles defending inside zone runs almost kept everybody else to like a league worst level, 3.1 yards per carry when teams ran against them inside zone.
Yeah, these often see teams that do run a lot of outside zone also run inside zone because they complement one another in that if you see the whole offensive line going one way, the defensive line can't necessarily overplay versus one or the other, depending on which they're seeing. All right, on to the sort of gap concepts, down the sort of guys where certain offensive linemen are responsible for certain defenders, power being one of the most popular plays in the NFL, one of the most popular plays in the history of football, a pulling guard from the backside. That is the dead giveaway for power. Guard pulls from the backside, very similar to the play we'll see here in a second, but talk about power for us, Sam.
Yeah, and most of the league runs zone most of the time. 58% of all runs in the NFL are now either inside zone or outside zone. So all of these gap concepts are used less frequently than their zone counterparts and less frequently than they used to be used when the league was a power concept or a power league. Power the run concept, like you said, it's all about that backside guard. The front side of the play is collapsing down. It's trying to create some space at the point of attack. Unlike zone plays, this does have a defined point of attack. You are trying to hit a specific place on the front side of the play, and then that guard is going to come around and just clear out the space in that gap and allow that running back to get some room at the second level.
Yeah, a very popular short yardage play, a popular one where you'll see this a lot of heavy formations, you'll see power, but also teams are running it with sort of more spread formations where you just have one back power where it's just one guard coming around to the front side. So it's a play that's still in use heavily, though, today.
And this is an interesting one because the Giants ran more power than anybody else in the league last season, and they also led the league in yards per carry when they ran power. So it's one of those times where the team actually running it the most is doing it for a reason.
It's also surprising because the Giants pretty much selected every other.
Also true.
On to the next concept, though, which is very similar for us. Counter is sort of highlighted by multiple players coming from the backside. It could be as many as 3, 4 players, backside guard, and then either fullback, tight ends, sometimes even the tackle coming from the backside. Have some numbers for us on counters.
Yeah, that's typically what it is, that extra tight end rather than a second offensive lineman. Counter is used a lot less frequently than some of these other run concepts. Nobody ran counter more than 56 times last year. It averaged 4.04 yards per carry, and the Falcons, one play all season long where they ran counter.
That's that one. On to the last one here. Duo, one of the run concepts has been gaining steam as of late in the NFL. It's highlighted by multiple double teams in the interior of that offensive line, and another run concept where it's run on a lot of heavier formations. You will almost never see this out of just a five-man offensive line. You almost always have 1 to 2 tight ends when you're running this play.
It's an interesting one as well, because if you've got a really good offensive line, it's devastating. You can just form those double teams up in the middle of the offensive line, just drive guys right off the line of scrimmage. Running back can have 5 yards before he knows what's happened. If you have a bad offensive line, it just looks like a pile at the offensive line. The running back gets to the line, faces a brick wall, and just has to find some space. It tends to be boom or bust when you get those bad offensive lines running it. Last season, it wasn't as successful as it's been in recent years. Running backs averaged 3.8 yards per carry. The Arizona Cardinals ran it more than anybody else. And as I said, the correlation to bad offensive lines, the Cardinals averaged just 3.9 yards per carry, so it wasn't tremendously successful for them.
Yeah, and one of the biggest parts about this is that, as you see here with the 2 tight ends, it bounces out a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It can lead to some, like you said, some very short runs, but also some very big runs when defenses lose contain.
And particularly when you do have those bad offensive lines, if this becomes just a brick wall here, the space for a running back may be to break it around the edge, to get outside of this. If this guy is the guy that loses contain, the running back suddenly has a path into daylight outside, and that's the only space available.
There you have it. Those are the offensive run concepts that are most prevalent in the NFL today. Make sure to go to check out ProFootballFocus.com to see the article breaking them down.